Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. The proposal that I have today is just a practical example that I've been asked by a couple of colleagues that can be sometimes useful to see the real practicality of certain theories. This is a practical example of how can we differentiate in lessons, differentiating for EAL students, for high achiever, for low achievers, for SEND students. So it is a proposal. It does not mean that it's perfect, far from that. It's just a way to share best practice. So this is a history lesson, but the strategies being used can be used across the subject, so it doesn't matter. So it is an example on why do nations go to war and why is peacekeeping difficult. This is the one that I've been using for grade 9 students. Yeah. So I always want to start with an icebreaker, with something that gives food for thought and supports the students in their thinking process. So I like to always start with a visible thinking routine. In this case, is the see, think, wonder. So this is the slide that I'm giving them. I print that on a paper, and what I do is while I'm taking attendance or while I'm just welcoming the students into the classroom, I put a visual, some kind of a image that triggers a stimulus, if you want, and this is the stimulus. So basically what we have is a cartoon that represents the causes of World War I, the alliance system, and so on. So I have not taught anything about that yet. I just want the students to think, and what I put very clearly in every slide is the lesson objective, because that allows me to measure progress. The skill that we're going to develop in that particular activity. In this case, we develop critical thinking skills because I want the students to practice observing carefully in order to recognize problems. Because we're an IB school, I always make a reference to the IB learner profile as well. In this case, is thinker. And I think it's very important that every time we make reference to real life situations and try to bring meaning to what we teach and why is it important to teach or to learn that. And in this case, on the top of the slide, it tells you why. In this case, is because we are in a world in constant conflict. Of course, Russia, Ukraine, Syria's war, Palestine. So I give them 5 minutes to think about that. I give them some advice, and then after that, we go to these see, think, wonder activity, and we discuss. Yeah, that allows for students to work at their own pace. Each one of them will find more difficult probably the wonder aspect or the think aspect. Some of one will find the see aspect easier. So this is just something to break the ice and to start into the topic. Then after that, for the EAL students in particular, what I do is a list of keywords that students will need to know for this topic. So I have a list of keywords that will come at some point later on in the explanations or in the sources that we're going to analyze, and I will give them time to work in couples or in groups, and then another visible thinking routine, which is think, pair, share, and try to not only try to understand the meaning of these words without using any source, just by discussion, and show me to what extent they understand the key words by use them in real life context. So creating a sentence or telling me something where any of these words is being used in context. And as you can see, the skill being developed in this activity is different from the other one. In the previous one, it was based on observation. This one is about transfer skills. So making connections between what we learn and other subject group disciplines. They can make these connections by trying to link these keywords into another topic. Yeah. So a second activity, it can take you as long as you want. It really depends on you, on your students, and how do you see they are working and they're being engaged in that. As an MYP schools, and because we're a concept-based driven curriculum, it's important also for me to realize to what extent the students understand the use of the concepts for each one of the topics. So instead of me telling them the concept that we are going to use in this topic, which I will do later on, I invite them to reflect by themselves. So I put this list of the key concepts. In red, you have the key concepts attached to individuals and societies. This is a message for the IB teachers, of course. But even if you're not an IB teacher, you can do this concept-related activity. And the same activity, think, pair, share, but in this case, what you want is to develop collaboration skills. You want them to think based on what we're going to talk about, which is World War I, peacekeeping, nations going to war. What concepts do you think we're going to develop? And it was surprising because in my class of around 20 students, at least 9 concepts were mentioned. And it's very interesting to see when you ask them, why are you going to use this concept, the explanation that they give you. Very interesting to see how the students are really engaged into this conceptual learning, moving away from topics and moving into a more, again, concept-based approach. So the teaching process starts now. Yeah, so just very, not many words, because I have a couple of EAL students in my class, lots of visuals, which will help them to really understand the causes of World War I. So, well, I'm not going to go through a historical lesson here, but just so you know that you have some activities based on visible thinking routines as to starting the lesson that will help you to differentiate for many students and to see the visible process, the thinking process of the students. And then you go for a couple of minutes into the real teaching aspect, the teaching content which has to be done. Yeah, and then we move into source analysis. The sources, I start with short, easy, straightforward sources, and I move into more complicated sources just to follow the thinking process of the students and to give the chance to all my students to shine. So maybe the questions attached to short sources will be asked to those students who I think they struggle with history, and the more complex questions will go to the ones that are more developed in their learning process. As you can see, the ATL, the skill developed in this activity is again different. In this case, we develop media literacy skills because I want the students to locate, analyze certain informations, synthesize the information, and use the information correctly. Yeah, so we are going to make reference to one of the key terms mentioned before, alliances. So there's a nice link with the previous activity, and I want them to read the source and tell me just how is this source related to one of the concepts that we used. Okay, in this case, one of the key terms was alliances. So I give them a couple of minutes to read, and lots of collaboration, because this also happens in groups, and they discuss, and after that we come to a brainstorm discussion in class to see, to check on their understanding. So every activity is also a way to check progress, to see if the students understand the topic, the process, and by formative assessment, just by questioning and just by giving this oral immediate feedback, you can work on formative assessment as well. Then we move into a more complex source, and more complex activity is an OPVL activity, which is in this case origin, purpose, value, and limitations. So as you can see, it's not only discussing the source as we did previously. This one is going in depth into the source. So I divide the group in 4. One group does the origin, another one the purpose, another one the value, the other one the limitations, and I ask them to look at the values and limitations for everything. Yeah, so what are the values and limitations in terms of origin of this source, and so on and so on. So if you want to know more activities or more tricks for source analysis, there's another video about research skills in my channel. So again, as you can see, a more complex source just to stretch the students. When I want to stretch them, I ask them specific questions about purpose, because out of these 4, origin, purpose, value, and limitations, the purpose is, I think, the most complex one. However, the origins is the easier one because the origins appear just there explicitly in the source. So I ask the questions about origins to the EIL students, so to a low ability students, and the questions about purpose to high ability students. I give them the idea of what does it mean, this OPVL, so they have the hints in there and they know how to work on their own. So it's also a way to develop self-management skills. Right? Then a short video. The video gives the main reasons of the main causes of World War I. And when I say main, is because the video divides the causes in MAIN. Okay, so militarism, alliances, and so ideology and nationalism. So they watch this video, which is 6 minutes long, and after this video, it's time for the students to work on their own for this first day. And this is the activity. And this is another example of differentiating assessment. So I give them 3 options. They decide. I, of course, guide them. Depending on the students, I push them for one or for the other. But as you can see, there's a different level of complexity going from one activity to the other. The first one is just the creation of an infographic, so it doesn't need lots of words. It's more lots of visuals and the process of thinking being presented in an infographic. This is for particularly EAL students. And the second one is a short essay, 250 words. For grade 9 students, I think it's short enough. And you want them to, based on the video they just watched, look at the main cause of World War I and explain them, all these four. And the last one is a more complex activity because I bring another command terms in there, which is analyze. And if you look at the Bloom's taxonomy, analyze is probably the top level of the thinking process. And they have to make to write a paragraph where they make a comparison between World War I and any other conflict in history. So in there you want them to develop transfer skills, critical thinking skills, and as you can see, for every activity I address or I assess different criteria. For one of them, I'll be looking at the communication skills of the students. The other one, I'm going to be looking at investigative skills, because with the essay they need to bring, of course, bibliography. And finally, in the last one, I'll be looking at the thinking critically, because the capacity they have to think critically about a conflict and make a reference to a real life situation. So I hope this activity or these proposals helped you. As you can see, the strategies can be used for many subjects and different year groups. Thank you very much. Bye.